Hey everyone, welcome back. We're doing something a little different today. It's still a deep dive, but with a bit of a twist.
Oh, a twist, you say? I like twists.
You see, we've been we've been going through all this really cool material on green energy, right?
We have some really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and we keep coming across all these terms, all this like specific vocabulary that's so important to understanding the whole picture of green energy.
It's true. And it's not just about understanding what the words mean, right? It's about being able to use them confidently.
Exactly. Like if you're reading an article or having a
Yeah.
discussion about green energy, sometimes those kind of technical terms can make you hesitate.
Oh, absolutely. I've been there.
So we thought, why not dedicate a deep dive to breaking down this vocabulary,
Hmm.
you know, really nailing the pronunciation and making sure everyone feels comfortable using these terms in their own conversations.
I love that. It's like a workout for your brain and your vocal cords.
Uh-huh, exactly. So let's start with a really basic question, the kind of question that's at the heart of any discussion about green energy. What is green energy?
Okay, so at its core, green energy refers to energy that comes from sources that are environmentally friendly.
Okay, environmentally friendly. That makes sense.
Right. But there's another key element here. It also has to be renewable.
Ah, yes. Renewable. That's a word we hear all the time.
All the time, and for good reason. It's kind of a big deal.
But what does it actually mean? Can we break that down a bit?
Of course. So think of it this way. Renewable energy sources are the ones that nature just keeps replenishing, like sunlight, wind, water flowing in rivers.
They're not going to run out.
Exactly. Unlike fossil fuels, which are finite resources, they're going to run out eventually.
Oh, I see. So it's like the difference between a well that's constantly refilling itself and a tank of water that, eventually goes dry.
That's a great way to put it. Renewable energy is all about sustainability, using resources in a way that doesn't deplete them for future generations.
And that brings us to another term we hear a lot, carbon footprint.
Oh, yes, carbon footprint. Have you ever, stopped to think about the impact your daily activities have on the environment?
I mean, I try to be mindful of it, but I'll admit the whole carbon footprint thing can feel a bit abstract sometimes.
It can, but it's actually pretty simple. It's basically a measure of how much carbon dioxide, a major greenhouse gas, is released into the atmosphere because of our actions.
So everything we do contributes to our carbon footprint.
Pretty much. Driving a car, heating our homes, even producing the food we eat, all of it adds up.
And the bigger our footprint, the worse it is for the planet.
Totally.
Yeah.
The bigger our carbon footprints, the greater our contribution to climate change.
So switching to green energy is a way to shrink those footprints.
Exactly. It's about lightening our impact on the planet.
I like that, lightening our impact. That's a good way to think about it.
Hmm.
Now, I know some people struggle with pronouncing carbon footprint correctly. Is there a trick to getting it right?
It's all about the emphasis carbon footprint, just like it sounds. Think of it as the mark your foot leaves on the ground.
Our actions leave a mark on the planet.
Exactly. That's our carbon footprint.
Okay, I think I can remember that. Now let's dive into some specific examples of green energy sources, starting with solar power.
Solar power, one of my favorites.
Mine too. Solar is a pretty easy one to say, but what about solar panels? Sometimes I hear people stumbling over that one.
Solar panels is actually easy to say if you break it down. Solar panels. Think of them as those big flat surfaces, usually on rooftops. They capture sunlight and convert it into electricity.
It's amazing how they just sit there silently harnessing the power of the sun.
It really is.
Speaking of harnessing power, what about wind power? Those giant wind turbines are quite a sight, aren't they?
They are. Wind turbines can also be broken down for pronunciation. Wind turbines. The emphasis on turbines is key.
Got it, turbines. So those massive blades capture the energy of the wind and turn it into electricity.
You got it. And they're often located in remote areas like vast open plains or even offshore where the wind is strongest.
And that brings us to another important term, renewable resource,
Yeah.
like water, for example.
Oh, good one. Water is definitely a renewable resource, just like sunlight and wind.
So we can use water to generate power too,
Right.
like with hydropower and those huge dams.
Exactly. Hydropower uses dams to create reservoirs of water, and then the force of the water moving through the dam generates electricity.
So it's considered green energy because it relies on a renewable resource and doesn't produce harmful emissions.
Right. As long as we manage water responsibly, it's a renewable resource constantly being replenished through the natural water cycle.
Okay, so we've got solar, wind, and hydro. Now, what about geothermal energy? That one seems a little less familiar.
It is, and geothermal is often mispronounced, but it's easy once you get the hang of it. Geothermal.
Mm,
The emphasis is on the third syllable.
geothermal. Got it.
Geo refers to the Earth, and thermal relates to heat. So geothermal energy is literally using the Earth's heat to produce electricity.
Wow. How does that even work? Where does the heat come from?
Imagine the Earth as a giant layered ball. Deep beneath the surface, the Earth's core is incredibly hot.
Like a giant furnace.
Exactly. And geothermal power plants tap into this heat to generate electricity.
That's incredible. And you said it's a really reliable source of power because it's not dependent on weather conditions like solar or wind.
Exactly. The Earth's core is always hot, so it's a consistent source of energy.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. Solar, wind, hydro, geothermal. It's amazing how much technology goes into making these green energy solutions work.
Isn't it? Efficiency, sustainability, innovation. These are like the buzzwords of the green energy world.
It's a field that's constantly evolving as we find new and better ways to harness the power of nature.
And it's creating a whole new vocabulary along the way. That's why this deep dive is so important.
Exactly. It's not just about memorizing definitions. It's about understanding the concepts and feeling comfortable using these words in conversation.
We're giving you the tools to really engage with the topic of green energy.
It's like a secret decoder ring for all those articles and discussions about sustainability and climate change.
Unlocking the vocabulary so you can join the conversation.
It's like we're giving everyone the tools to be fluent in green energy, right?
I like that analogy. It's about being able to not just understand, but to actually communicate these important ideas.
Exactly. So how about we do a little pronunciation check on some of the words we've covered so far?
Sounds good to me. What do you have in mind?
Well, let's start with renewable. Any tips on how to say it clearly and confidently?
Renewable. Okay, so the emphasis is on the second syllable, renewable, able. And I always think it's helpful to break down the word's origins. Re means again, and new signifies something being replenished, made fresh, or new again.
So renewable energy sources are the ones that are constantly being renewed. They can be used again and again.
Exactly. It's a word that beautifully captures the essence of the concept.
I love that. Little etymology lesson right in the middle of our deep dive. Okay, how about sustainable? That one could be a bit of a tongue twister.
It can be. The key is to emphasize the first syllable. Sustainable. Think of it as something that can be sustained or kept going over a long period of time.
So sustainable energy sources are those that can power our lives without depleting resources or harming the environment for future generations.
Precisely. And remember, sustainable practices aren't limited to energy. They apply to all aspects of our lives, from the food we eat, to the clothes we wear, to the way we manage waste.
It's about making choices that support a healthy planet for everyone.
Exactly.
Okay, now for the big one, carbon footprint. I think this is a term that a lot of people have heard, but maybe aren't totally sure how to pronounce or even fully grasp its significance.
It's become such a buzzword, hasn't it? But yeah, it's important to understand what it actually means.
So remind us how to pronounce it correctly.
Sure thing. carbon footprint. Just like it sounds.
Well,
and as we discussed earlier, it's a great visual, right? Think of the imprint your foot leaves in the sand. Every action we take leaves a mark on the planet, and that mark is our carbon footprint.
such a helpful analogy. It really brings home the point that even seemingly small actions can have big impact on the environment.
They really can. Everything adds up.
Okay, so let's revisit some of those specific green energy sources and practice saying their names again, starting with solar power.
Solar power. Harnessing the energy of the sun.
It's pretty straightforward, but how would you describe solar panels in a way that's clear and memorable?
Imagine large, sleek panels, almost like high-tech shingles covering the rooftops of homes and businesses.
Like giant tiles.
Kind of. Those are solar panels, and they're made up of photovoltaic cells, which have this amazing ability to convert sunlight directly into electricity.
And it's becoming more and more common to see them integrated into buildings, almost like a design element.
That's true.
Okay, next up, wind turbines. Those are the majestic giants with the spinning blades, right?
That's right. And wind turbines is a great one to practice pronunciation because it has two distinct parts. Wind turbines, make sure to emphasize that second syllable in turbines, turbines.
Turbines. Got it. And they work like high-tech windmills, capturing the kinetic energy of the wind and converting it into electricity.
Exactly. And they're often grouped together in what are called wind farms, which can be on land or even offshore.
And that reminds us of the term renewable resource. Just like sunlight and water, wind is a natural resource that's constantly being replenished.
We got it.
So as long as the wind keeps blowing, we can keep generating electricity from it.
Pretty cool.
Definitely. Okay, how about hydropower? Hydro comes from the Greek word for water, and we use it to generate electricity with dams, right?
That's right. Hydropower harnesses the energy of moving water to generate electricity. It's been around for centuries, but it's still a really important source of renewable energy in many parts of the world.
How do you pronounce it again?
Hydropower?
Hydropwr. I think I was putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable before.
It happens. But yeah, it's all about that emphasis on PW.
Okay, now for geothermal energy. That one I think people might be less familiar with, both in terms of the concept and the pronunciation.
It's true. Geothermal can be a bit tricky, but it's really not that difficult once you break it down. Geothermal. The emphasis is on the third syllable.
Geothermal. Okay, I think I can handle that.
Geo refers to the earth, and thermal relates to heat. So geothermal energy is literally earth heat energy.
And that heat comes from the Earth's core, right?
Exactly. Remember that image of the earth as a layered ball? Deep beneath the surface, the earth's core is incredibly hot.
Like a giant natural furnace.
Exactly. And we can tap into that heat to generate electricity. It's a pretty amazing process.
That is. And you said it's a reliable source of power because it's not dependent on the weather, like solar and wind.
That's right. The earth's core is always hot, so it's a consistent source of energy.
So we've covered solar, wind, hydro, and geothermal. That's a pretty good overview of the main types of green energy, and we've practiced pronouncing their names.
We have.
But even with all this vocabulary, I think there's still a lot of confusion out there about what these terms actually mean and how they relate to our daily lives.
You're right. And that's why it's so important to keep having these conversations. The more we use this vocabulary, the more we break down these concepts, the more informed and empowered we'll all be.
It's about making these ideas accessible to everyone.
Exactly.
After all, the transition to a more sustainable future depends on all of us understanding the language and the solutions.
Well said.
We're kind of like equipping everyone with a green energy dictionary, you know?
I like that. Giving everyone the words they need to join the conversation.
Exactly. So let's recap some of those key terms one last time.
Sure. And maybe we can give some tips on how to actually use these words, like in everyday conversation.
Perfect. How about we start with renewable? What's a good way to explain that one to someone who's never heard it before?
Well, you could say something like renewable energy comes from sources that nature constantly replenishes, like sunlight, wind, and water.
It's energy that never runs out.
Exactly. Simple and to the point.
Okay, what about sustainable? That one can be a little harder to explain.
Yeah, it's a bit more abstract. You could try something like, sustainable practices are all about finding a balance between meeting our needs today and ensuring that future generations can meet theirs.
It's about living in a way that doesn't deplete the Earth's resources.
Exactly. Leaving enough for everyone.
Now, what about carbon footprint? I feel like that one gets thrown around a lot. But do people really get what it means?
It's definitely a buzzword. To explain it simply, you could say, your carbon footprint is a measure of the impact your actions have on the environment.
Specifically in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, right?
And you can even give examples like driving a car, using electricity, the food we eat, all those things contribute to our carbon footprint.
And the goal is to make those footprints smaller, right?
Yeah.
To lighten our impact on the planet.
Exactly. And switching to green energy is a huge part of that.
So it's not just about knowing these words, it's about using them right.
Absolutely. The more you use them, the more natural they'll feel.
Like you could be talking to a friend and casually mention that you're trying to reduce your carbon footprint by biking to work or something.
Exactly. Or you could talk about how you're choosing products from companies with sustainable practices.
You might even inspire someone else to learn more about green energy.
That's the goal, to spread the word and get everyone talking about these important issues.
Well, this deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too. And I hope it's encouraged everyone listening to learn more about green energy.
There's so much to discover. Maybe you could pick one of the green energy sources we talked about and do some more research on it.
Like how solar panels actually work, or the latest advancements in wind turbine technology.
The possibilities are endless.
And the more we learn, the better equipped we'll be to create a more sustainable future.
So that's it for this deep dive into the world of green energy vocabulary.
We hope you enjoyed it.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive into a fascinating topic.